G'day everyone, the Great Sage is a challenging final boss, and I'm going to show you an example of how to use the Tri-Point Spear's unique skill and the thrust stance to deal heaps of damage and brute force the boss down. And of course I'll show you a full breakdown of his combos and abilities at the end. So let's take a look at the kill first with some general mechanics, tips, and build discussion. Now this build today revolves around using the unique passive on the Tri-Point Spear, which when you use Forceful Thrust in the thrust stance, you shoot a flurry of swords at the target, which you'll see just here. Now that does a respectable amount of damage by itself, but we're going to make it even better by using the Earth Wolf, which gives you a small amount of focus on hit passively. So watch here in slow-mo as all these little hits from the swords give us focus passively. The little hits from the whirling attack also give us focus, so you can get about half a focus point out of each of these. And given that Forceful Thrust only costs one focus point, we're doing a lot of damage and we're refunding a lot of focus in these, and you can really spam it throughout the fight. Now from this whirling attack, you can actually tactical retreat from that to trigger Forceful Thrust again. That's just worth mentioning for those who aren't familiar with thrust stance as much. Now the main spell we're using throughout the fight is Rock Solid, and there's a few reasons for this. Firstly, it generates a good amount of focus, so it's an easy way to keep fueling those forceful thrusts. And it also interrupts quite a few of the boss's more complex combo chains. I won't go into detail here, but if you're interested, watch the breakdown after this video. And finally, it's a really easy way to regularly reset the active benefit of the 3-piece monkey set, which gives us 8% critical strike chance for 15 seconds every time you use a spell. In this build, Rock Solid only has a 12-second cooldown, so it's a good way to get good uptime on that critical strike chance. That only accounts for 3 of our armor pieces, so on our arm guards, we're going to use the Ochre arm guards, which synergize really well with this build. Every time we use a focus point, we're going to get 6% critical strike chance, which we trigger every single time we use that Forceful Thrust, which is the main source of our damage anyway. So given that we're leaning heavily into crits, I'm using the Weaver's Needle mostly for the passives of crit damage and crit chance, but it also does a moderate amount of damage just by itself over its full duration. Alright, so that's the idea behind the build. I'll show you spark points later, but for now let's pay a little more attention to what I'm actually doing here. Now this is not a clean kill, and that's intentional to demonstrate that there's a fair bit of room for error. As you'll see here, whenever I have a few focus points, I'm going to simply use Tactical Retreat into Forceful Thrust, and then follow that with a few seconds of Whirling Attack, just depending on how he responds, and I'm going to repeat straight from there. Tactical Retreat out, Forceful Thrust again, and then back in with a Whirling Attack. Depending on what he's doing, you can do this a few times in a row, like you've seen there. Now a quick tip here, the reason I froze him there with Immobilize is so that I can drink with my gourd without him coming in and stealing it like he does. You shouldn't aim for this, but if you see the opportunity, you may as well. Now in general, I'm never doing more than 1 to 3 light attacks before going into Tactical Retreat and Forceful Thrust. The main reason is simply to bait out those little backwards dodges or rock solids he does before I use my Forceful Thrust. Now the downside to being reckless and aggressive like this is that you will get caught in animation locks like this sometimes. That's okay, there's a fair bit of room for error in this build. You can simply heal up afterwards and just accept that he's going to probably steal your flask at some point. Now when he goes into the pillar stance on phase 2, don't try and dodge these, you can just staff spin them. Those projectiles are too quick for dodging, I could never get it right. Staff spin's just so much easier. As you can see, my fight pattern is nearly always the same. 3 light attacks into Tactical Retreat and Forceful Thrust. It doesn't matter if he starts using a combo, just trade into it with your Forceful Thrust and then Tactical Retreat straight back out and you'll dodge most of the damage. If you are really struggling, make sure you use your Transformation or a Pluck of Many during these last phases. I don't use them in this clip, but they are really useful, even just as an extra health bar for a particularly dangerous mechanic. You can just activate your Transformation. Be aware though that when you use a Pluck of Many, the boss will retaliate with a spell. He often disappears, flies up into the end, does a big slam, but you can definitely double up with your Transformation and a Pluck of Many to get a decent amount of damage out. In the same vein, you should proactively use whatever pellets or medicines that you have, any of the damage ones, crit ones to enhance your output, as well as ginseng for more focus, or even the Septenary Heartfire pill to reset all your cooldowns. So here we are, he steals my drink. You can avoid this by using the gourd at the right time when he's animation locked, or by using Immobilize, but honestly it's probably more harm than good. Just accept that he's going to get a heal or 2 off, and then you can just use your flasks freely. Now towards the end of the fight you will have a second use of your Vessel and Spirit, so make sure you use that Earth Wolf again, as well as activating the Weaver's Needle at some point. Now in terms of sparks, you want to prioritize the Rock Solid tree fully, as well as the Thrust Stance tree obviously, because that's what we're using. In Foundation I take the entire Stamina tree, only 3 points in Martial just for those focus generation on the first few light attacks. And then in Survival you want all the offensive passives, so your damage, your crit chance and your crit damage. Only increase your maximum stamina, health or mana if you've got sparks left over. In the Transformation tree, the useful passives are the cooldown for alteration spells, which is our Rock Solid. You can take Steadfast for defense, or if you want, you can take damage after perfect dodges, as well as the invincibility duration for see-through attacks, which is our tactical retreat, obviously very useful for this build. Now it is worth mentioning, if you like to use Spellbinder, this build does work really well with Spellbinder. The Forceful Thrusts in Spellbinder absolutely shred the boss, look at that. Now the only thing you'll want to change is your armor. We're not using the Monkey Piece 3 set because you're not going to be using spells to benefit from that passive. You want to replace them with 2 of the Gale Guard sets, and then put the See No Evil on your head for improved perfect dodges to get even more focus from the Gale Guard 2 set. Alright, combos and abilities phase 1. Throughout the fight, the boss will consistently dodge backwards for the first 1 or 2, sometimes 3 attacks that you make against him, and this resets after only a short period of time. You basically have to expect it every other combo. Now it's when you see this kind of light illusion of himself that he's going to disappear somewhere and then reappear and throw his staff at you, so you need to expect that. One of his most common basic abilities starts with the staff like this on the back of his neck as he turns into a double thrust. Now this is one of the most annoying abilities because at this point here, after those double thrust, he diverges into about 5 different combos that all have different finishes. If he follows that with a little swipe of the water, he's then going to go into a flurry of kicks, followed by a final horizontal swipe. In this version here, if he follows the double thrust with a little somersault towards you, he'll finish that with a quick swipe. There's another version where he follows those 2 thrusts with the same somersault towards you, but then he jumps up into the air and does an overhead slam. He can also follow the 2 thrusts by running at you a little bit like this, and then he's going to jump into the air and do one of his big red glowing smashes. So this ability has lots of variations and it's kind of annoying to deal with. For this reason, I recommend after you see that initial thrust, rock solid that second one every single time, like this, and it'll interrupt the rest of the combo. You won't get any of the follow-ups. When he starts by spinning the staff at his waist like this, it's going to be a 4-part attack. The first 3 are just slashes frontal, and then he finishes with a 4th overhead smash. When he starts by spinning his staff at his head like this, there's a few different options. When his staff glows on this second attack, which is a slam, he's going to follow that with another leaping slam. But when the staff is glowing on the initial spin at the head, he's going to follow it with 2 more swipes, followed by a little whirling attack pummel thing. Sometimes he'll just do the whirling attack as well. Now when he starts by winding up an uppercut like this, it's going to be a 5-part attack. He'll follow the uppercut by kicking down at you quickly, followed by a very quick thrust, and then 2 back-to-back swipes. When he starts with a little hop into the air and a big roundabout swing with his staff, there's about 4 or 5 different combos that he can do. Most commonly, he followed it with a thrust into a swipe and then finishing with a big red swipe like this. Sometimes he'd follow the big hop swing with a single thrust into one of those overhead leaping smashes. Sometimes after the big hop swing, he'd transition into one of those first combos we looked at, which was the double thrust into the little swipe of the water into a flurry kick. And then finally, after the swing and thrust, this was usually in phase 2, he would leap away from you and then leap back in with a single slash. When he starts like this, it's similar to the last one, but his feet are on the ground still and it's more of a backwards swing. It's a 3-part attack. He'll follow it with another horizontal swing, and then he'll either leap away from you and then leap back towards you with a single slash, or in this other version, after that second horizontal swing, he'll simply go into one of those leaping overhead smashes. When he starts doing his staff spin, you simply want to back up away from him, and then after his spin, he'll go into one of those leaping overhead slashes, into a horizontal swipe, and then he'll either leap away from you and do a charged up thrust, or after he does the overhead smash and horizontal swing, he's going to start another bout of staff spinning, so just back away from that. While I'm at it, the dodge cue for most of those charging red attacks is when his staff has a little flash and it makes a little ping noise, the same as when our staff hits 4 charges. When he climbs his staff in pillar stance in phase 1, it kind of does nothing, just dodge away from him, there's just a small impact where he lands. And finally, when he takes a pluck of his hair, he's going to summon 3 illusions to come at you one after the other. The middle one has a slight delay, but otherwise it's just 3 simple dodges. When you see this happening, you should run at him and do a single light attack to interrupt it. Alright, now in phase 2, he will keep using all of the base moveset from phase 1, so it is definitely worth getting familiar with the phase 1 mechanics. Now similar to his dodge thing we've just seen, in phase 2 he'll also occasionally do rock solid like you see here. When this happens, you just want to back up and not attack him. If you do, he'll counter with one of those cutscene grab attacks. Now there's a few modified attacks in phase 2. One example is this one where he throws his staff at you. He's then going to fly up into the air and then do one of those big red slams. You want to ignore those first few spins and only dodge the final red slam. His next spin into that double thrust now also has one of the variations where he uses Mobilize against you, even more reason to use Rock Solid on that second thrust to interrupt it. When he uses Ring of Fire in phase 2, he nearly always follows with a charged heavy attack. Again, wait for that little flash before dodging. He can also merge a few combos that we know together. For example, here he started with the uppercut, but then he goes into that illusion pop and ranged throw of his staff, which remember now has this extra bit at the end. And of course he's got a few new attacks. This one here, which he always does at the start of the phase, and then throughout phase 2 he'll also do it again, but this time he'll follow that second red smash by going up in the air again and doing another red smash. Another new attack starts with this kind of pole vault backwards, which he'll then kick his staff at you and then follow it into a bit of a backwards thrust, and then he'll throw his staff through you again and finish with a final horizontal swipe. I mentioned this in the kill clip. When he does this, you simply want to staff spin these projectiles. They're too quick for dodging, and then dodge as he dashes back down to you. Finally, once you get him down to about 50% and further, he's going to do a few of these cloud moves where he flies down through you. You want to dodge these as he basically dips towards the water, and he'll usually finish with a smash or two. So that's it, everyone. If the video helped at all, please like, comment, and subscribe. It helps me out heaps. I hope you've enjoyed your time in Black Myth Wukong. I know I've certainly loved this game. Thanks for listening, everyone. Cheers.